Good, you're good at that transition.
So good morning, welcome to Rigg Radio at Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center. Good morning, welcome to Rigg Radio at Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center. My name is Tammy Thomas and I'm your host of the show. So I say this every show, but I really mean it today. Well, I always mean it, but I have two really top-notch guests today. I feel like I've hit like the lottery with the two of them. So I've got, for the first time, you will meet Andrew Lee, who is our Director of Workforce Engagement at Mary Rigg. And Julie Blake from United Way is back with us today to talk about the collaboration between community-based organizations like Mary Rigg and the work that United Way does. So before we get into all of that, which is my standard operating procedure for all of my first-time guests, we're going to talk to Andrew Lee from Mary Rigg. So I know Andrew, and I feel like I'm a rock star working with him. But we're going to let Andrew tell you a little bit about yourself. So first, welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
So we're pleased to have you. So let's get into who Andrew is. And when I say that, I want to kind of get into, we know you work for a community-based organization because you work for Mary Rigg. But let's talk about, I generally sometimes will ask you about your very first job, but we won't do that. I'll first start with saying that Andrew's from the UK. So just so you know, we've got a little bit of something different within Mary Rigg with Andrew. But how did you first get into not-for-profit work?
So we came, yes, as you pointed out, from the UK, and it's 25 years plus now. I think I'm right in saying I was Rolls-Royce's first trailing husband, which was a little confusing for the people who were used to providing those processes. But really what ended up happening was just, I took a lot of stuff I'd done in the early part of my career, which was mission driven, and transitioned into the nonprofit sector, which is different but equally mission driven work.
Okay, and I will say that initially you were an engineer. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't leave that out. Can't leave that out because
that's a little secret.
Yeah, because
yes,
that's a different transition to go from doing something engineering based, which in my mind is more kind of that whole nature of inquiry, that process, and that structure kind of work and the way you think. And I can say this: I work for Andrew, and so I'm often reminded about structure and process and making sure that I'm following a path. So it's interesting that you went from that to this, and that's why when I say how did you get into not-for-profit work, how are you using those skills in this work?
Technology is a through line in all of that stuff. I've always been an early adopter of things. I like new things and different things. So that's probably something that's kind of consistent, and you've experienced that.
Yeah.
And I have a small role doing that here. So yeah, that would probably be the primary element there, is just the ability to understand how technology can be applied in places where perhaps it hasn't been historically in a big way.
Okay. So now, Julie, I want to switch over to you. So I'm going to reintroduce Julie Blake, who is the Manager of Community Engagement and Immersive Learning at United Way of Central Indiana.
Big title.
It's a big title. It's a big job. And, I'm so happy that I got a chance to get to know you through the Leadership United program, which we're going to touch back on again through the rest of the show. But just for those that may not have been listening or weren't unfortunately able to listen before, tell us a little bit about you and how you got into not-for-profit work and found yourself located at United Way.
Well, my first not-for-profit job was right here in the neighborhood. I shared a grant, you like Lily, both South and corporate centers. So I spent half of my time at Concord Center and half of my time at West Indy. So it feels like I'm always coming home when I come over to the West Side. Love to work on the West Side. Fell in love with the neighborhood and the work that was going on here. Then I got a job at Keeping Minneapolis Beautiful, and then it cascades into some other experience. I've got over 25 years of not-for-profit experience in Indianapolis, and now I'm at United Way.
Okay, and what we know and we say a lot on this show is that people that are working in not-for-profit, we don't do it for any other reason other than the fact that we're passionate about the work we do. Because it takes a lot for us to do this work, and sometimes we have to stretch ourselves beyond what our natural capabilities are, and our natural, if we're going to be an engineer, we've got to push beyond what we thought or what we were doing before, and it's because we have to care about people. And so with Mary Rigg, we do a lot with employment and training. We help people to find jobs and get trained to get into professions. But for our job, you can't train someone to have humility and have empathy and be nice. We have to be that person. So just want to make sure that I said that, because I feel the passion in your voice when you talk about what you do. And not just today or previously on the show, but as I've gotten to know you through Leadership United, you are very passionate about what you do. So, we share that, and I applaud you for that, because I think that's a great thing. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today on our show is how United Way and community-based organizations, could be Mary Rigg or could be any of the other community-based organizations around the city and in Marion County. I don't know the exact number of those that there are. There's a lot of us that do a great deal of work. Same, similar, there's ways we can collaborate, there's ways we can feed off each other, refer to each other, but we're going to talk about the collaboration between United Way and how we work within those community-based organizations. So, one of the things, when you go to the United Way website, it says United Way of Central Indiana, where every person has a purpose. So, what I think about that, and I think about the people that I've known from United Way, our purposes aren't all necessarily the same. Everybody brings something. And so within the tenets of what United Way has, you guys work with advocacy and public policy, capacity engagement, grant writing, data research, initiatives and programs, and thoughtful leadership. So if we think about in terms of working with not-for-profits or community-based organizations, let's talk about, kind of some of those things. And before our first break, let's just talk about what that looks like. So if we think about advocacy and public policy, what's kind of way, how do you approach that when you're thinking about community and in some of the organizations?
Well, we're not too far away from our steakhouse, and that's a very important place where there's a lot of people who are making great decisions, and we don't want to let that go without them knowing the stats and statistics. We kind of act as a knowledge and story carrier because we're getting stories from Mary Rigg, we're getting stories from the community, and bringing that to the steakhouse. We have a whole team of public policy experts, and they do a great job of saying, here's numbers, but behind these numbers are people, and these are things we've got to get done. And so they kind of are the voice for the people, so to speak. But what we always like to say is that everybody has a voice, and we want to empower people to use their voices for good and for change.
Okay, and so then when we switch, I'm going to make this very conversational between the two of us. So if we switch back to like the work that we do, we're thinking about, okay, how we advocate the same way. How do you see that, what our role is important, or that it works exactly in the way that United Way would like for it to work?
Just working the way you want it to work?
We hope, right?
Yes, I mean, where does our voice come from, really, is the question. And there's a lot of avenues for that. Mm-hmm. So you tend to think of that as coming from the top, from maybe board members, from the CEO. But we have people in here every week as volunteers. We have people in here every day as clients. And what they experience in here when they come in gets reflected in what they take with them when they leave. So the voice is really all the way up the scale from some of our board members who are well connected, visible people, through the staff, and all the way to clients who go out, and we know 50% of the people that come into our employment program come off the word of mouth, or these days email or electronic referral from somebody they know. So that's a voice, an element of the voice in itself.
Okay, perfect. So then we've got what your position is and what you're sharing with our legislators, and you're sharing at the State House. We're kind of doing the work of that. So in the middle of that, there's that whole piece of, well, how do we do this? And what's our capacity and engagement piece of that? I don't know from the United Way standpoint what your vision is or what you think. How do we go out and how do we engage with people, or how many people actually need our services? And then from our end, we have initiatives and we have directives for maybe our funders to say, these are the numbers of people that maybe need that. So how would, from the two of those different organizations, how do we work that together?
I think it starts with relationships, building relationships. We like to take the approach that we have a lot of partners, a lot of people who are coming to us to look to how can I get engaged. but really the need is in the neighborhoods and in the communities. And we could tell Andrew and Mary Rigg, hey, this is what we think you need, but that would be a disservice because it wouldn't be successful. Long-term engagement, long-term success means we are asking the experts. We're asking Mary Rigg, we are asking Concord Community, small grassroots organizations, what are your needs? What do you need? And how best to serve you? And that's what the data, when we collect data and stories from our community-based partners, is that we collect those stories so that we can then say, hey, and all these other organizations that come to us, here's the data, here are the stories, here's the success stories, here's the heartache, and try to pass along the pulse and the heartbeat of our communities so that they can get engaged.
Now, does Nunway have someone that actually goes out and meets with community-based centers or does anything, just kind of grassroots fact finding, I guess, or just seeing how programs are working and what they're offering?
Yeah, we have a whole community engagement team. Gosh, I don't know if they're 20, 30 strong. I feel like they are. We meet with our community-based organizations quarterly. We have these experts in housing, we have experts in employment, we have experts in investment and grant making. And these are resources in which we send these folks out. They're hardly at their desk. They shouldn't be at their desk if they're doing their job right. And I'm here, I'm out and about all day today. So
and you're out and about a lot.
Yeah, well, I like to be out in the community. That's where all the really cool stuff is happening.
Okay, perfect. So then, Andrew, I'm going to kind of, because we're talking about collaboration, how these entities work together. And United Way has their community engagement team, and they're out and about, and they want to make sure that neighborhood centers or community-based organizations are kind of doing some of the work that they know needs to be done. So not just for Mary Rigg, because you're unfortunately the representative for all the community-based organizations, like right now, unofficially. So how do you see our role or the role of community-based organizations tying into the vision that they have as far as getting out and making sure that the people they think and believe to need the service, that we're providing those services?
Well, we have a responsibility to make sure we are reflecting what the needs are of the community. So we have engaged, we have to be talking to those folks. Most of the folks we're seeing are West Side individuals.
Okay.
We're engaged with West Indianapolis Congress. We're engaged with many of the other key entities here in this neighborhood that do neighborhood work. We have relationships with the schools through our youth program. We have relationships with the churches. Great partnership with the library, which is doing stellar work on digital literacy and internet access for neighbors. And without all of that, it's, you need all of that to be able to say, we feel like we know what's going on here.
So I feel like, when you hear United Way, you hear United Way, and it's this big organization, and you have a lot of people really don't have a real idea of all the different things that you do and how what you do is very similar to what a community-based organization does. So we're going to take our first break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about the different areas, because we talk a lot on RigWorks about education and training, but there's basic needs, and there's all these other services that we're both collectively involved in. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that when we come back. We're going to take our first break. You're listening to RigWorks Radio at Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center. We'll be right back. So we are talking to Andrew Lee from Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center. He's the Director of Workforce Development Initiatives. And again, we have Julie Plake from United Way. She is the Manager of Community Engagement and Immersive Learning. Long title, but good work. So very necessary and very appropriate. So before our break, we were talking about some of the services and the initiatives of United Way and how they pale or how they come into contact and work very well with the work that we as community-based organizations do. And I mentioned that United Way was a big, broad name that when you see United Way, you know, it feels like this big mountain, and it is. It's a really good organization. But within that and within the individual communities, there's a lot of work that gets done that's very similar to what we as community-based organizations do. And so we were talking about like engagement before we went to the break, and we didn't really get into somehow some of the similar things that we do and what your initiative is for that. So let's just talk about some of those. So for instance, we as community-based organizations, we address things like food insecurity, healthcare, childcare, education, housing. So let's get into some of the initiatives that United Way has and what you do to address some of those things.
Well, you named them all, so awesome, good. You know, United Way. Yeah, when I was growing up, I always saw the kind of thermometer ticker, and it would go up and up and up. And when it got to the top, we knew they were fully funded, and I just thought that's all United Way did. And that's one of the things that we do because, of course, that money we then throw into the community. And it is because we stand on issues of we're trying to eliminate poverty. And one day, I hope to say I don't have a job because we have solved that problem. But until we do, which I fear is not anytime soon, we're working on collaborating with community-based organizations on the issues that you talked about, and just bringing to light, bringing up to the surface, very complicated process of looking at what poverty looks like and how we can battle it, how we can make changes, and the food insecurity, housing, employment, childcare. Those are issues that we are working alongside with organizations like Mary Rigg to help to bring a solution, help to bring resources, help to bring people to understand and get involved in that work.
Yeah, because we're at this point we're not really solving it. We're working through it. I won't say putting band-aids on it, but we're moving along as best we can, I guess, with what we have. So Andrew, when you think about providing services along that way, as far as basic needs, in housing, I want to talk about a little separately after this, just because I want to share something. But we think about what the services that we provide that affect food insecurity or even simple things like transportation or whatever. And United Way has these initiatives. Is there something more community-based organizations could do, or are we doing the best we can? What are just your basic thoughts on different ways? And they can be they don't have to be your opinions won't be necessarily reflected in those of Mary Rigg. They can just be what you think.
Sure. Yeah. I hate to say, poverty is a big thing. Part of the challenge of it, I think, is to break it down. And we have statistics for that if you think of it in government or funder reporting terms. But if you think of it in more personal terms, it's so very different for everybody. Case in point, a client was in here last night who has 4 of her own children, single mom, had a family member pass away and is now housing her 3 kids. So she's gone from being a single parent of 4 kids to a single parent of 7 children. So that's not anything she could have avoided. She's taken it on as a responsibility. But now, whatever stage she was in, she's, the money is now spread, the resources are now spread. Is she officially in poverty? Is she deeper in poverty? It's so individualized. And so the responses have to be, to the degree that we can, individualized, because the blanket processes, I think, and we've seen those applied occasionally, to Julie's point, we haven't solved it yet. doing any of the things that we have historically done. So in an ideal world, the best we can hope for, I think, is the maximum amount of flexibility we can have from a supporter. And we do have that in United Way. You have 2 or 3 core areas of focus, but once those resources are available to us, they're ours to use as we see best fit. And so I think that it's the best model that you can probably put out there. And then after that, it comes really down to how well can you serve the individual client. And some of that is on the CBO, and some of that is on the client. Could we show up at our best regularly? Can they show up regularly? Because when that happens, we can usually see progress. So the heart of it is just how do you meet together effectively to make that change?
Yeah, and you bring up a very interesting point, because there is some responsibility on the part of our parties, all parties. So, the participants that we work with do have some due diligence, and they've got they have had some skin in the game. I think that we naturally have skin in the game because we're the community-based organization. We're the people that they come to for the help. And then, United Way is able to provide the funding for us to do some of those things and provides a little bit of insight. So, and we don't have as many restrictions, maybe because you guys are working with so many different areas of how we help people. So that's kind of how the collaboration works, because our feet aren't held strictly to the fire for everything, and we recognize that somebody could come in our doors on Monday and be a single mother of 4 kids, and then they come back on Wednesday and then a single mother of 7 kids, and those things happen. So, and that's why the work that we do is so important. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about housing. We see a lot of need for people that are struggling with housing security. You obviously know a little bit about housing security. I'm going to share a little bit about what I saw last week when I went to the movie about housing at Clues Hall, and I think it was Beyond the Bridge was the title of the movie, the documentary, and it was so awe-inspiring. I have to say, I sat there and I was stunned, because if you get a chance to do some research, there's clips about these 2 filmmakers that are local, they're from Indianapolis, and they traveled around the United States to different cities to address homelessness. And so the model that I think Milwaukee and Houston adopted was housing first and then services. And so I think that as we talk about this as being something that we collaboratively as our organizations do, maybe it's something that we should consider, because the housing first and then services model is that when people are homeless, we say we can't find you housing, or we can't help you until you find housing. You stay on housing first. Well, we don't solve homelessness by doing that. And he talked about shelters being not used as shelters because people are living in shelters. Shelters were designed to be short-term stays, but people are living in shelters because rather than providing housing and then services, we are leaving people homeless, and that doesn't solve homelessness. And so what happens is, if you get into a shelter or you get into some temporary housing, the first time you miss curfew, or if you are a drug user and you use drugs, well, then you get put out of the house. Well, have we solved homelessness by doing that? But what Milwaukee and Houston have done was provided housing for people, brought them in, and whatever, then provided services. So if you needed mental health services, once you got housing, then you had housing. And if you needed drug addiction or whatever services, once you had housing, then you weren't homeless, but you were not left on the street, because who goes to the street as a addiction counselor and goes to a tent city and says, let me help you? But those people will come to a person that's housed and offer and provide services to help them. So I'm just interested in, you guys, I would implore you to go check out some of this. But what do you think about a model like that? What do you think United Way might say?
I think, we were given the invitation as well. Many of our staff went, so it was.
Were you there?
I had the invitation. It was on the calendar, and of course, nothing else came up. But I will tell you, I've read 2 books by Matthew Redman. One is called Evicted. The other one is Poverty by America. I strongly encourage everybody to read them, just because he's so good, and it's very plain spoken. He is also a person that's gone all over the United States. He has lived in poverty. He is firsthand. He had roommates who were living in poverty. And he has some really great ideas. And I think one of the things that you were talking about with homelessness, I think the first thing to do is all of us in the world, need to take a look at homelessness and poverty differently. And then the next step is to change our actions in our everyday things that we do, change the mentality about how we look at poverty.
That's it.
And really, the book was life-changing for me because I couldn't start my car yesterday and I didn't know what it was. I called somebody and said, hey, can you go over and look at the car? He goes, I think it's the battery. And I said, oh, thank goodness, it's nothing anything more serious. Jumped the car, we went to the place, we got a new battery, $247 later, my car was running again. I went right into the mode of a person who had the same situation, but maybe this car was their house. Maybe this car was the only way they could get to work. And did they have $247 to fix it? And I suddenly had a great appreciation for people who are working super hard. And people would say, well, why don't they have jobs? Well, sometimes they have 2 and 3 jobs. Sometimes they don't even have a house. And so I guess it's a long way to say is we as consumers, we as neighbors, we as people, we have to change our mentality about housing, about poverty, about these issues, and stop running away from them.
Exactly.
And not be afraid to get our hands a little messy, maybe.
Just straight out dirty.
That's
just
right.
In the mud.
Well, and hopefully it's not mud, right? Hopefully we can just wrap our arms around people and provide. So housing first, I'm all for it. Hopefully Indianapolis has learned a lot and maybe they're making strides to do that too.
Well, and I will say our mayor was at this showing, and so he gave it a little bit of address before we actually got to see the documentary. So Andrew, I'll just flip over to you. So like the housing first model, I mean, you know, we don't do that here, obviously, at Mary Rigg. We do follow whatever our set of guidelines are, but just what are your thoughts about housing first as a model to maybe cure or reduce or eliminate homelessness?
So the very first thing I ever volunteered for after college, when I was working in central London, was a homeless shelter. Did that a couple nights a week for a couple of years. And it struck me, you know, as somebody coming from a very stable, caring, loving home, you know, it struck me just how much someone is dissociated from reality, from society, when you strip them of all that stuff. And so I've stayed in various forms in touch with that issue. And of course we see it a lot here. And no, we don't do housing first because that's not a resource that is really easy to produce. But even if it were, I have some reservations about this, which is that housing is a highly multifaceted, homelessness is a highly multifaceted issue. Some portion of our homeless community would no doubt benefit from a housing first policy because they're within, not to depersonalize it, again, my engineering sort of terminology, they're in the margin of error for that solution. Some are not. And so, yes, I think it's part of a multifaceted approach. Homelessness is poverty, they're just all wrapped up together. There's always going to be some element of that. The city makes assessments of how many folks are on the streets a couple of times a year. We should be able to get that number down, I think. And it would be, I'd be interested in seeing somebody take a stab at saying, let's reduce the number of people on the streets of Indianapolis by 50%. And what do we need to do that? What is the easiest way, honestly, to get that portion of our homeless community to a better place? And even if it's not entirely off the streets, it's more secure, and maybe it's step by step.
So, and I will say, just a little bit of an example to what you said about, your car stopping yesterday, and you begin to think, okay, what if I didn't have the resources or the time to fix my car? The very Rigg employment team did something similar. We try to use public transportation because we have people that come, they ride the bus here, and sometimes well, my bus didn't come, or my bus was late, or, and, well, we take it, we accept it. Sometimes we don't know if maybe they just didn't start soon enough to ride the earlier bus, but we found out on our own that riding the bus is quite a challenge. So much so that we started off, caught the bus right out here on Moore Street. We rode down to the transportation center and transferred and went clear to the east side. Because there's no one straight shot to get around Indianapolis. You have to go to the transit center, everything kind of originates there, and you go to the east side. And then we caught the bus back and got downtown to the transit center again, and we were waiting for our next bus. And I don't remember what happened, the bus didn't come, the schedule didn't work out. So we were gonna wait for another bus, and then our fearless leader had this scathingly brilliant idea that we could walk back. So there were a team of, I think, 5 of us. And so he said, well, I'm gonna walk back. Anybody wanna walk with me? Well, I decided I could walk back, which is interesting. I think there were 3 of us that walked back. And as we were walking, yeah, Miss QR walked back with us. So we walked back, and the interesting thing was, we were walking back, and just as we got close to Mary Rigg, the bus we were waiting for came, and our other team members were on that bus. But the thing to share about that is, we could literally walk back sooner or in the same amount of time that we would be able to use a bus. So if someone is looking for a job, or if they're trying to get to their doctor's appointment, and they're relying on public transportation, these are the barriers and obstacles that our people have to work through. So when you mentioned that about your car, I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what that's like, because we tried to use the bus as a valid and viable reason for a way of transportation, and it didn't serve us as well as we thought it should, or we thought it would. I'll say I thought it should. I can't speak for the crowd. I thought it.
We were first-time users.
Yeah, we were first-time users, but I'm just saying, and none of our clients are first-time users because they've lost their cars or they don't have money for gas, and we're asking them to use public transportation, and then they say, well, I don't know how to ride the bus, or I hate the bus, and we want to say, well, you need to ride the bus. I now have a little bit more of a, okay, I understand some of that.
I think what we experience is the tension of, sure, we could go out an hour earlier and wait for a bus, but if I was somebody working on an hourly basis, I've just lost an hour of doing something, whatever that is. And if you did that regularly, you'd struggle to work.
And we've got people dropping off kids on the bus before they go to work, and how early do they have to get up and get that process started? If they have to be at work at 10, they got to start at 5 or 6 in the morning. So, okay, so this was a good discussion. We're going to take our next break, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, we're going to get into some Leadership United stuff as well. But you're listening to Rigg Works Radio at Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center. We'll be right back.
How long
in at the door. Yeah. Need to be here.
So, we're talking to Julie Blake from United Way and Andrew Lee from Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center, and of course, I'm Tammy Thomas from Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center. So we're just talking about the United Way collaborative efforts to work with community-based organizations, and we kind of got into a really detailed conversation about homelessness during our last segment, and we all recognize and know that there's a need to help people to no longer become homeless, and I had shared about the documentary about housing first, the model that they used in the documentary. And we kind of even offline talked a little bit further about, just what that might look like. And Julie brought up something very interesting I'm just going to share, which I think we all say, but you just did it so brilliantly. It's great that we've got politicians and people running for offices that really are promising to do things to help with homelessness and help with that population. But really, it does have to start locally. And I don't really know, I don't have any scathingly brilliant idea of how that can start. But I think that individually, as community-based organizations, as organizations, not-for-profits like United Way, they really to just begin to put our eyes on what locally we can do, and maybe just internally within, outside of the legislators and all of that. What can we do? How can we build programs or whatever to affect homelessness? And we know that people are homeless for a variety of different reasons. There isn't a one size that fits all. There absolutely isn't. When I see homeless people, sometimes I do think, I wonder who that person was when they started out. Everybody was born to somebody. Everybody had a mom. Maybe they had some siblings. Maybe they were in a traditional family. We don't know their stories. One of the things that, Kiora, our AmeriCorps intern, when she did her cold cuts and cuts, she went out and interviewed people and just asked them how they felt about having a haircut, when they last had their haircut, what people thought about themselves. And one of the things that people shared with her, which is what homeless people have shared, and many did in the documentary, was that we just want to be seen as human beings, as people. And that we don't want people to look at us, and certainly they don't want people to feel sorry for them, but they want them to understand they're human beings just like the rest of us. But by the grace of God, any one of us could be that person. So I think that, I really was appreciative and liked that discussion that we had. And I really liked the way you said that we just have to start locally. Because maybe local is how people follow. That's that servant leadership piece where we start to do something, and then people that in larger organizations, or maybe the politicians or people that have money, then begin to address that because they see what happens small. That's how small businesses start. They start, and then people recognize them, and then they grow. So that's just my 2 cents worth on that. And so we're going to talk about Leadership United now. So I'm so very thankful that I was part of that. I'm so thankful for you for, and I know it wasn't you. There was a selection committee that chose people, but I'm just thankful because I got to meet you and do that. And I'm thankful to Mary Rigg for affording me that opportunity because, it was a program that I felt like I grew professionally. And it wasn't a free program, so there was some investment on the part of my employer for me to be in that program. And I really just feel like I've grown, and I'm really thankful for that. But let's talk about Leadership United. So what actually is Leadership United?
Leadership United is a board development program at United Way. We've been doing this for over 35 years, and what makes it unique and I think special, in addition to the 40 individuals that participate, is the community-based organization board fellowship. That is what makes this different than every other leadership organization or program in Indianapolis, because we have a lot of them and they're fantastic. And people like Andrew who say, yes, we're all in. We have our participants are attending 2 classes each month from January to August, and they learn all sorts of really amazing things through our facilitators. And then they get to serve on a board fellowship for 6 months. So they're learning in the classroom, and they're putting the practical experience being in a boardroom, sitting in the boardroom with those board members and watching them as they go through plan events, as they are talking about governance, as they are talking about finances and trying to raise dollars for that organization. And that really is, I get super excited about the program because we can't provide this amazing program like you were talking about and all your learnings without our community-based organization. So it's that collaboration of, and it's not perfect. And I always tell our participants, hey, your experience is going to be as much as you put into it, which they also, the community-based organization also has a responsibility. And we keep learning, and every year we get a little bit better, I think. But I always tell them, listen, if it wasn't 100% what you thought it was supposed to be, what is, right? What is? And learning through difficulties, learning through failings, learning through something that's not working 100%. How can you make your input and where can you make a footprint in that organization?
Okay. And so, Andrew, we've had some experience, or we've had people, individuals from the Leadership United Board Fellowship as part of our Mary Rigg board. So, how did that happen, and do you see that as being beneficial? Share some of your thoughts about that.
So obviously I won't speak on behalf of our board. I'll just give my perspective of the engagement and what I think we've got out of it. I've been on boards for 20 plus years. Recruiting is not that. It takes time. It takes time to figure out who you've got, are they a fit? So to find a program that's doing some of that upfront screening is incredibly helpful. It saves us time and effort. There's a solid curriculum, a structure, an idea of what you want people to have experienced and understood when they get to the end of the program, which is well suited to that work. And we found it to be a very good, very effective recruitment tool for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and that's part of the goal of the Leadership United program as well. So within each of the learning sessions, I've attended all of them since January, and within each of the learning sessions, there have been people there that have represented different aspects of board membership and board leadership, which, if you don't know anything about boards, and I thought I knew a lot, turns out I learned a lot more than I thought I already knew. So there's like governance committees, there's the executive committee, there's fundraisers, and so we've had people that have come to our learning sessions and shared what their fellowship experience about. They were all alumni, so they came in and they shared what their fellowship experience was like. They shared what boards they're on now. They've shared real life experience of what board membership actually entails, because there's boards where you pay to be members of the boards, there's boards where you just give time and service. Can you explain to us a little bit about some of the different boards that maybe some of the Leadership United fellows have been on?
Yeah, well, they're all over the central Indiana area. We're blessed to be all the way from Morgan County to Hamilton County, and of course Marion County, surrounding counties, and all different facets of not-for-profits. So mental health, seniors, housing, disabilities, which is great because we have 40 individuals in that room and not everybody's the same. So it's really nice to be able to collaborate with so many different organizations. We had, I believe, 30 different organizations this year, so there was a wide gamut. And we do a strengths finder. We also do, we take a look at strengths and interests and make those matches, so that we're not just throwing somebody on a board that may not be interested in that particular mission and work. And so there's a personal connection. And then, as we go through the curriculum pieces and talk to them about, hey, you as a board member, you are fiscally responsible, financially responsible, legally responsible. These are serious things to think about, but we don't want it to be a scary thing. We want to say, listen, where is your passion? Where does that lie? Where do your strengths lie? If you're an accountant, you don't need to be on the finance team, right? Maybe you want to be on the events team because you really like to plan events and things like that. So there's small grassroots organizations, and there's large organizations like United Way, and then there's kind of somewhere in the medium like Mary Rigg. And so I always tell somebody, even after their fellowship, don't join the board unless you 100% know that that's where you're supposed to be. Take a couple extra months and say, hey, could I stay on as a committee member or a volunteer until I decide? And at the end of the program, there's not always a board position open. So if not there, say, hey, listen, I've been with you for 6 months. Could I stay for a little bit longer until the next position opens? Or how can we find another place for them? And there's just so many. Indianapolis is so amazing. We have such a huge not-for-profit world here, and there is something for everyone. And there are a lot of organizations that are looking for as Andrew said, it's a great vetting system. It's a great way to build people up and send them through. So if not here, where?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I will say from my own experience, aside from learning about just being on a board, the connections that you make with the people in the room are awesome. There are people from profit and not-for-profit businesses that are there. And it's great because you get to tell your story and share your experiences, but you get to learn a lot. We did some tours. I think we did a tour of the airport. We did a tour of the State House. And the tour of the State House was totally awesome. If you've never visited the State House, you should go. The building is beautiful. The history there is beautiful. That was totally awesome. And so I just, as part of my recruitment piece, for anybody that might be listening, it's an experience that if you can participate in this, by all means you should. So what are the qualifications and what does that application look like?
The applications,
Process.
yeah. So we start September 16th through October 25th. And we'll be accepting applications. The application is not to trip you up. It's not to trick you into answering some serious, super questions. But it is very thought-provoking because we want to get to know you as a person, as an individual, as a business person, as somebody who's wanting to serve on a board. We ask some really great, crucial questions about your past and your experiences and volunteer experience. But also why you want to serve on a board. And like I said, the application is not to trip you up, but is to get the details on why this place to serve or why this place to spend. It's 9 months. And so we also ask questions about, listen, there are a lot of people that would like to go through this program. How serious are you about going through this program?
Because there's a commitment.
Yeah,
there's a big
there's
time commitment.
Yeah, and then in addition to the classroom work, but it's a half day, twice a month. There is a minimum of 10 hours to on this board fellowship, and where most people, I would say 80% of the folks spend anywhere from 20 to 30 hours because they fall in love with these organizations or want to learn more. There is that commitment too.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's really worthwhile to choose an organization for the board fellow to choose an organization that maybe is an area of interest, whether they're currently working in an industry or not, but if it's just an area of interest or something that you're passionate about. So it just gives you a great chance to see the inside of that organization, because you might see Mary Rigg on the outside and you've learned a lot about the programs and services that we provide. But if you're on a board fellow and you're working with the board as part of Leadership United, you get to see a lot of stuff behind the scenes as far as the work we do and our commitment to our community and that kind
And
of
I
stuff.
believe you have 3, is that right, Andrew, right now?
I'm just thinking about that, but I know we have 4.
Okay, 4.
And I'm trying to think if there's another one in there. And then I'm optimistic that we've got at least one coming on from this year's cohort. So it truly has been an excellent experience in bringing on new people. It's helped us with diversity, and they're stuck. Of those 4 that I mentioned, 2 of those have been on board. I think are in at least their 2nd term now.
That's great.
So, and we have 3-year terms. So yes, it's quality people. Let's stick them out there.
And so were all of those people that we have on our board that came from Leadership United, did they do their time here as well, or they were in Leadership United and they maybe spent their fellowship with another organization?
I don't actually know that. I know that of 2 of them, and yes, they did. The other 2, I'm not sure.
Okay.
They didn't provide us.
Okay. And I was asking that because if we have the 2 that actually spent their fellowship while they were in Leadership United here, it kind of speaks to my point that I always say that Mary Rigg does believe in growing their own. So, I mean, we've had people that have started in our reception area now that might be, coordinators or coaches or whatever.
Yep.
So we've had those people from Leadership United that were doing their board, and now they're actually on our board. That just goes back to, we do grow our own. When we see talent, we recognize it, we keep it for ourselves, we keep the best for ourselves, because that's how we grow and that's how we thrive. So.
And I will do a shameless plug tomorrow from 11:30 to 1. We have a virtual opportunity. It's called Connect to a Cause, and we've got 10 organizations. Mary Rigg is one of them. And it is a way to meet 10 different organizations virtually, just learning about all the really great work, their stories, their mission, and they can attend. If you're looking for a place to get connected, we hope that you'll find one of these 10 organizations to serve on a committee or on the board.
Perfect. So then if somebody's interested, Tell us what they should do.
Yeah, well, they can go to the United Way, UWCI.org website, and on there, there's a tab that you can click on for Leadership United. All the information is on there, and gosh, it's almost 3 weeks or so. There'll even be a little button that says apply here, and you can apply for the application there. We also have on September 11th, another virtual opportunity for you to get to know the program. 11:30 to 1 is kind of our shtick. And you can learn from other alumni on that call why they chose Leadership United and why they continue to keep involved in that kind of capacity. We'd love to have the next 40 great leaders. We start, like I said, in January, so we're looking forward to finding those folks and sending them on our way.
Okay, now are there some basic requirements that someone would have to apply to be part of
Well, they have to be able to pay for it, of course.
That's always important.
I know, in professional development, we're very thankful for Mary Rigg and seeing that as an investment in you. So there's a financial commitment. There is, once again, 2 days, 2 half days a month with a minimum of 10 hours of fellowship. The application process, there's a commitment to be present. We have an attendance policy like everyone else does. And most of our sessions are at United Way, but we are getting out into the neighborhood. We'll be at Mary Rigg taking an amazing neighborhood tour. We'll be at the Girl Scouts, checking out their new Founders Lodge. So we will be in and out and around. So clearly there needs to be some kind of vehicle or transportation, modes of transportation to attend these events. And also to have an open mind for learning, and hoping to have an unbiased mind to be able to learn from not only our facilitators, but our folks in the classroom too.
Is there any particular work or education experience or levels that you look for?
Yeah, I always say if you're jumping out of college, unless you've been very involved in boards in college, which I don't think I ever was, but there is that possibility. But I would say if you are in your mid-20s to all the way to retirement, those are kind of the age that we're looking for. And we have had all sorts of folks from I don't have a job, I'm looking for a job, to I'm retiring after 20 or 30 years of a job. So they're all over the place. We had 2 guys from an environmental firm. We've had people from LISC, we've had people from John Bonner, we've had people from, Lilly, and in the financial world. So they're all over the gamut, and I think that's what makes it so special, because everybody is learning, everybody is different.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that, Julie, and thank you so much, Andrew, for being with us. We're going to be wrapping up our show here today, but if you're interested, you can go to unitedway.org and
UWCI.org.
Oh, UWCI.org, United Way of Central Indiana, UWCI.org, and you can find information if you are interested in the Leadership United program. Julie's going to be back with us on September 10th because she's going to bring an alumni from the Leadership United program. So thank you so much for your showing up and continuing to want to show up. Andrew, we thank you so much for the time that you spent with us today. No problem. So we're going to wrap up another edition of RiggWorks Radio at the Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center. Thank you so much and have a good week.